Man here, and today is maintenance day on my wife's 2010 Jeep Patriot. The old sucker right here. It's the Northern Edition with the 2.4 liter 4-cylinder engine, and it has about, I think, 139,000 kilometers on it. And it's been about 10,000 kilometers since the last oil change, which is a little higher than I normally like to take it. I usually like to change the oil at around 7,500 kilometers. But time got away from me, and now she's at 10,000 kilometers since the last oil change. So we're going to go through the process that I use to change the oil. And I guess a caveat here is I'm not a mechanic. This is just the way I change my oil. It's a fairly basic job, and pretty much anybody can do it. So I'm going to get it up on the ramps because the old gut's too big to crawl underneath it, and we'll get changing the oil. So let's get at it. Okay, here's her 2.4 liter 4-cylinder. I'm going to be going in here to check the air filter and probably replace it. I put a new battery in it last year, so that should be good, but we'll check on that. Antifreeze level is looking good, and washer fluid is not bad. We'll probably top that up. And brake fluid, kind of hard to tell through the container, but I think it is okay. Yep, starting to get a little discolored, so it might be time to bleed the brakes one of these days, but certainly not a panic right now. This is pretty much my wife's round town car, so there's not a lot of stressful miles on it, even though round town can be a little bit harder on an engine. But because she travels a fair distance to work every day, it gets good and warmed up, so there's no chance of it getting carboned up and stuff like that. So let's just check the condition of the oil here. Now, if we look at that dipstick, let's get it in the right position. That oil is looking pretty dark, so definitely time to change it. Now, being at 10,000 kilometers, I'm not too concerned about it. I always use synthetic oil in it, and a synthetic oil filter. So, you know, you can get a lot more mileage out of synthetic oils than you can standard oil. So, you know, you look at other vehicles where they're recommending much longer intervals, like my Jeep Grand Cherokee Limited. It'll go 15,000 kilometers before it requests an oil change, and a lot of that is computerized now on those newer vehicles, especially my Jeep, where you don't go by specific mileage. The computer is calculating driving conditions, and because my Jeep is mostly highway, which is fairly less stressful than stop and go driving in the city, it doesn't recommend oil changes for upwards of 15,000 kilometers. I usually change it between 10,000 and 12,500 on that Jeep, but again, if you're following the manufacturer's warranty and everything, you are good to go, waiting for it to tell you that it's time for an oil change. This one is still set to the old style, where at 5,000 kilometers the odometer reads that an oil change is required, but I don't always pay attention to that too much, because again, I usually change oil at between 7,500 and 10,000 kilometers, and it's worked out so far. At 138,000 kilometers, there's no sign of wear. It's not really using any oil, like it may be down half a liter between oil changes, and overall it's running pretty good. So today I'm using Castrol Edge fully synthetic oil. It's a 5W20, which is the recommended viscosity for this vehicle. I'm also using a Fram ultra synthetic filter. I don't know how much improved these filters are than a standard filter, but I don't know, just for the sake of being consistent, I always use the synthetic filter. Now they say up to 32,000 kilometers protection, but I change the filter every time anyways. And also we got a Fram air filter, which I'm sure is due to be replaced because it's probably been upwards to 15,000 kilometers since the last one. It says 20,000 kilometers on the box, but you can never go really by what they say on the box. You just got to inspect things and replace them as required. I should also mention that I did warm up the vehicle for approximately 5 minutes. I didn't get it to operating temperature because then things get too hot to work on, but warming up, just get the oil circulating, get any debris in it flowing through, and then as you stop the engine and let the oil drop back into the pan, some of that dirt and grime or carbon or whatever you want to call it within the oil will come down into the pan and is still floating within the oil, and then when you drain the oil it comes out with it. Okay, one thing that I did, which you definitely don't need to do when changing oil on a Jeep Patriot, is I took the bottom cover pan out and I took off the top engine cover just to give a better visual as I'm filming this. And because you can see there's an access hole here for the to get the oil filter off, and an access spot there for the drain plug. So you definitely don't need to go to this extent, but I thought it'd be easier to see what's going on under there with a camera than having all those covers in place. And also it's always a good idea every now and again to kind of get under there and check and see if there's any leaks at the back of the motor or anything like that. So the top cover just goes here, and the bottom pan goes under here, basically covers the oil pan and everything. And I think it's mainly for aerodynamics, creates less drag that way. Awfully hard to look for leaks until you take the cover off though. So I'm going to put some cardboard down, and I'm going to pull the oil filter off now and the drain plug out, and get rid of that old oil. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is just prep the gasket of the filter with a little bit of oil. That just helps to remove it later, so it's not just a dry fit right against the block or the oil filter mounting housing. So just put a little bit of engine oil around the gasket there, and that just stops it from sticking on too hard. Here's the oil filter here. If I did my job right the last time, it should just spin right off. A little tight, but it is turning. Need to get a better position here. Make sure my pan is lined up. I always seem to get more oil on the floor. I tell you right now, this is easier without the cover on. I was really able to get both hands in there and grab the filter and twist it off. The cover on underneath, it's quite hard to get at. Just need my cloth now to wipe my hands. Okay, let's just wipe the old oil off the surface here. Nice and clean. So you can see the surface there. That's where the old oil filter came off, and the new one's going to go back on. Just spin it up, and when it touches the mounting face of the oil filter mount plate, just give it about a quarter to half a turn till it feels hand tight. You don't want to go much tighter than that, or else it's a real bugger to get off. And there's our old filter there. Next step is going to be to drain the engine oil out. Get some light in here maybe. Right there is the drain plug. It is a number 13 millimeter, and I usually use a ratchet to get it off. Make sure it's going the right way. Try and keep my hands out of the way of the oil, but no matter what, I seem to get oil everywhere. And we'll just let that drain out for a while. Now, it doesn't take too long for the oil to drain out of here. It's only about 4.5 liters of oil. I usually let it go for as long as I can. Okay, I think that's about as good as it's going to get. It's still dripping a little bit, but it could do that for days. So I cleaned off the drain plug. Now I'm just going to put her back in. Wipe off the surface. And tighten it down. We're not going to tighten it too much. There's probably a torquing specification for a drain plug, but I just kind of go where it feels nice and snug. While I'm under here, I'm just going to give everything a quick inspection, check for any leaks under here. Don't see anything there. A little bit of grease on that boot for some reason. Belt looks good. That's a new one. I just had it replaced a couple of months ago, along with the water pump there. We'd have a new water pump put on because it was leaking. And also on the other side, it's hard to see, I had to have the thermostat housing replaced because it was leaking. So you can see some of the pink residue from antifreeze there, but probably two jobs I could have done myself. However, time was a factor, and I couldn't keep my wife's vehicle tied up for too long, especially it's a job I've never done before. But everything looks nice and dry under here. Back of the motor looks okay from what I can see. Transfer case looks good. Transmission's dry. Struts don't appear to be leaking. The boots are okay for now. This one here might be something to keep an eye on. Boot's good. That shock looks, or strut looks good too. Look down the vehicle. Everything looks pretty straight. Straight and clean and dry. It's not doing too bad for just about 140,000 kilometers. Okay, I think that's the bottom end for now. Put our oil plug back on and tightened. Oil filters in place. Nothing from the bottom looks to be amiss. I think that's it for the underside. Okay, this bottom cover's back on again. You can see the access hole for where you would take the oil filter out, and the access hole here for the drain plug. Basically, it's not too bad to take out. It's three screws here, 3 screws or bolts, whatever you want to call them, back there, and then a couple of these plugs on each side, those black clips where you pull the center out and then it brings the clip out. So everything we have left to do is on the top now. So I'm not sure what happened to my audio at this point. It sounded like my head was in a bucket of chum and it got all garbled. So it's at this point really though where I'm just opening up the oil cap, and we're going to add about 4.5 liters into the motor. And I always like to put a towel or a rag around because I'm kind of sloppy and I always end up spilling or dribbling. So we're just going to take our 5W20 oil and pour in 4 to 4.5 liters. And once we have the oil poured in, I'll end up running the engine for about 4 to 5 minutes just to get everything circulated, and then we'll shut her down and check the oil level and see if we need to add more. Okay, I got the 4 liters of oil poured into the engine, and now I'm just going to put the oil cap back on. And we're going to start it up and let it run for a few minutes, and then we'll shut her down and let the oil drain down back into the pan so that we can get a good level once everything is settled. Okay, the next step is to get at the air filter, which is inside this air box here. So the first thing I'm going to do is take off this battery access panel, which also acts as an air channel. So that there's 2 screws here, you turn and pull it out and it slides out of the air filter housing. And I'm going to take off this air pipe here. Just loosen that off with a slotted screwdriver and pull it straight off like that. And I also take off this breather tube. And I also take off this breather tube here as well. Just makes it that much easier to get at everything. And the 2 clips that hold the box together. Just be careful of the sensor cable here. There's the old filter there. Relatively dirty. I get it closer to my light. I can still see through it, but it's been 18,000 kilometers, so it's probably just prudent to replace it anyways. Even though you can see light through it, it's not that good to get it that plugged anyways, so. And because I have another filter here, I'm just going to replace it with a new one. Air filter just fits in the housing. I'm standing on a step here that keeps sliding on me, so if you see my hands disappear from the camera, it's because I fell. Now we just get the air box back down and make sure that the base fits into 2 tabs, one on either side. And then there's a tab on this side here that fits into a gap, and one on the other side there, and it should just seal right up. And these clips should go on fairly easy, and if they're not and you're fighting them, it means the cover is a little out of whack. So that was easy. Just watch the sensor cable here again. Put that back on there. Grab our handy screwdriver. Tighten down the pipe that feeds the air intake. Tighten her a bit. Breather hose back on. Before I put the battery cover back on, just have a look at the battery. It's fairly new, about a year old. And the last one didn't die, I just replaced it because it was 6 or 7 years old and just it was time. So just checking the connections here, make sure they're tight, there's no corrosion on them, they look fairly clean. So that's good, and we'll put the battery cover back on. And there we go, she's back together. Look at that. To me, a job's not done unless I gouge or cut myself, so perfect. It's going to mean it's a good job. Okay, so I had the engine running for a couple minutes before I changed out the air filter, so the oil's had a good chance to settle. So it's just, let's have a look at it, see what level it's at. Now we are up on the ramp still, so it is a bit of an angle. So we'll see what it says now and see how much we need to add after. Okay, so it's showing still below the safe line, so we need to add at least a good half a liter, maybe a whole liter to it. So let's do it. Because of the angle, though, I'm only going to add about half a liter, and then we'll bring it down from the ramps after we're all buttoned down here and check it again. Okay, that felt like about half to 3/4 of a liter. So that's pretty much it for this oil change. The antifreeze level looks good. I'm not going to check it for freeze point right now. It just is not necessary right now. We got lots of windshield washer fluid in there. So that's in windshield washer fluid, antifreeze. You can see the pink lines up to there. The yellow line on the washer fluid is there. Let's have a look at our power steering fluid. It's got lots in there. I mean, power steering fluid doesn't usually go away unless you have a leak. So there's not a lot, there shouldn't be any evaporation. It's a sealed system, so that's good. So I'm just going to put the engine cover back on, take it off the ramps, and we'll check the oil again and see what level we're at. So the engine cover has these 4 rubber grommets, if you will, and there's 4 posts on top of the motor that these just snap into. So it's just a pressure fit, no screws, nuts, bolts, or anything. It's just a matter of getting it lined up right. On my step again so I can get some downward pressure on it. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. And it is on there. Okay, because now I've had it running again, I'm just going to let it settle to check the oil again, and in the meantime I'm going to just check tire pressures all around. The door label says they should all be about 35 pounds per square inch. This tire's a little low, it's only at 31.5. For some reason this one's high at 40.5. So I got that back one right at 35. one I'm going to have to add a couple pounds to. Got her perfect now. Okay, let's double check the oil level and see where it's at. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but it is in the safe zone. Could probably use maybe another quarter of a liter, so I may as well just top it right up. And that should do it. Okay, the last thing we need to do is reset the oil change required reminder on the dash. So it's a very simple process. And if you don't know what I mean by that, I'll just turn the key on here. And as you're looking at the dash, it will come up with a reminder that says it is time to change the oil. So you see oil change required. So the steps to reset this are as follows. So turn your key off and make sure everything resets itself so that everything is off. And then you're going to turn the key just to the on position, don't start it. And then you're going to hit the gas pedal 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then turn the key off. And make sure everything resets itself again so that it's off. And then if we turn the key back on, we should not see that reminder anymore. And we're good. It hasn't come back yet. Okay, so that's the steps I take when changing the oil on my 2010 Jeep Patriot with a 2.4 liter engine. And it's really a simple task overall. If you have any kind of motivation and a bit of mechanical aptitude, not that hard to do for sure. So some of the steps I basically did was drain the oil, replace the oil filter, replace the oil with 5W20 synthetic oil that was recommended by the manufacturer, meets manufacturer specifications. Changed out the air filter because it was at probably 18,000 kilometers since I last changed it. Again, not overly dirty, but then you don't want it to be completely packed full of crap either to affect performance and gas mileage. So, and we also checked tire pressures, which for some reason 3 were way over what they needed to be. I think 3 of them were 39, and this front one was 31.5. Now we've always, for the last 4 years, we've had trouble with this tire just slowly leaking air out, and it's always on this particular rim, so I'm not sure if there's a problem with the rim. We had it repaired. They never really told us if they patched the tire or what, or just reseated it, so it is still sort of leaking, so it might just be something we'll have to put up with. But that's pretty much the whole job. Overall, everything looks good. There's no real leaks that are apparent. Everything's nice and dry, it runs smooth, so we're going to call this job done. So that's it for Mundane Man for this exciting edition of an oil change on a Jeep Patriot. I hope you enjoyed it. See you again. There it is, all washed up. Not doing too bad for being 8 years old. I mean, it's got dings in it from careless people. Paint's holding up pretty good though. Nothing wrong with that. I gave the inside a bit of a detailing the other day. You wouldn't know it for a lot of the stuff my wife carries around, but she uses it like a storage locker. But overall, still in good shape. We'll probably keep it for another couple of years.